Um, Let me begin, even while people are continuing to join. And well, hello everyone. I'm Jeremy Lent, and really glad to welcome you to the first Deep Transformation Live Network meeting of 2024. So yeah, as we start a new year, we generally, right, we all like to come together and wish each other a happy and a flourishing year ahead. And I certainly wish that for all of you here today. Um, but as we look around at the world, I expect we all share a sense that in spite of our wishes, that there might be a very difficult kind of year might be beckoning, like as we're all only too aware, in Gaza, after Hamas's atrocity last October 7th, Israel is conducting this brutal campaign of what's increasingly recognized as genocide against the Palestinian people. And here in the US, where I live, there's a very real threat that democracy itself, to the extent it's ever existed in this country, may be snuffed out before this year is over. And meanwhile, the Earth is burning up with the hottest temperatures it's experienced in, I think, over 100,000 years. And meanwhile, the fossil fuel companies get to celebrate that they've managed to turn COP proceedings into basically a fossil fuel trade fair. So I think more than ever before, we need a moral anchor that could really unite people of different cultures and religions on a shared life-affirming foundation. And that's why I'm so delighted today that we get to partake in what I personally believe is the most important source for that that's ever been created, that I know of, the Earth Charter. And as many of you know, the Earth Charter is an ethical framework. It launched almost 25 years ago. It's been endorsed by thousands of organizations around the world. And it was the product of a decade-long worldwide, like cross-cultural conversation, which is one of the things we'll find out about today. And as we hear from our wonderful panelists, and Evelyn Tucker, who is actually involved in developing it, and Mirian Vilela, who's the executive director of the Earth Charter International. And we had been we expecting Sam Crowell, who's a member of the Earth Charter Council, but he was letting us know he's in North Carolina right now, suffering from massive storms with power outages. And so he got a message that he may not be able to make it. So if he joins, then we'll be able to welcome him later. But I hope by the time we finish, you'll see why I view the Earth Charter basically as an ethical cornerstone for an ecological civilization. Yeah, a civilization that sets the conditions for all beings to flourish on a regenerated Earth. But before we kind of drink deep from the Earth Charter, let's turn to our own network, because this meeting is our monthly opportunity to build our own unity as a global community, to basically meet each other and build our social cohesion, to get inspired by hearing what others are doing, and to build the collective intelligence we need to shift our trajectory of this civilization. And so to help to do this, we're going to start right now going into breakout groups for just 5 minutes right now to meet each other and to build a heart connection. And after the panel discussion, which we'll have for about 30 minutes, we'll rejoin the same breakout groups for another 10 minutes for a deepening conversation. So right now, let's get into those breakout groups. Remember, just 5 minutes, just enough time to share your name, where you're joining from, a sentence or two about whatever's in your heart mind right now. And or just saying if it's your first time or what you'd like to ask the panelists. And remember to hold space for each other, make sure everyone in your group gets a chance to be heard, and that you'll be in the same group later. So you'll have more time to share with each other later. And so let's get into those breakout groups right now. See you all again in just 5 minutes. Yeah, so wonderful to just connect with some people there. I hope other people enjoyed it. And I just want to note what a wonderfully attended session this is. Really exciting to see so many people inspired and wanting to share, to really drink deep from this font of inspiration that's available to us today. And so without further ado, let me invite Mary Evelyn Tucker and Mirian Vilela to join me here on the spotlight. And I think for people who joined a little late, Sam Crowell was one of the panelists, but he's in North Carolina and let us know there's been massive storms, electricity is down, so he may not be able to join us. And if he does, we'll bring him in if and when he's able. But so wonderful to have you both here. Good friends. And just by way of brief introduction, Mirian, Mary Evelyn Tucker was intimately involved with the genesis of the Earth Charter itself, which we'll explore more with you in a moment, Mary Evelyn. And she's also founder and coordinator of Yale's Forum on Religion and Ecology, which, if you don't know about it, recommend you check out. And along with her husband, John Grimm, she was responsible for a 10-volume series published by Harvard on world religions and ecology. Her lifetime has been spent in this intersection between that spiritual and environmental consciousness. And along with that, she's co-creator of the Journey of the Universe project, which, along with the Earth Charter, is one of the most inspiring things I've ever come across in my life. And I think most people share the sense of that. And Mirian, welcome to you. Mirian is the executive director of Earth Charter International, which has been working on this. And you, I think, have been actually in this initiative since 1996, basically even before the Earth Charter itself was formed. And if I understand, primarily with UNESCO and other UN agencies. And so Miriam has led so many workshops, course, seminars on the Earth Charter and those values and principles. So we'll get to hear more about what you're doing with Earth Charter International in a minute. But let me turn to you, Mary Evelyn, first, if I could. And we've had a couple of conversations over times when you've talked about the process that went into something like a 10-year process. I think you told me to actually create this Earth Charter. When I first discovered it, I was just so blown away. It was like a hallelujah. It's like, yes, why doesn't everyone know about this? I finally found sort of, ground zero of how we could think about a different reality. And then when I discovered how it came about, it sort of took it even more to another dimension for me. So perhaps you could just give us a little bit of that backstory, if you will, about how it came to fruition.
Well, thank you, Jeremy, for hosting us today and all the hosting that you're doing with others. It's terrific. And I'm also delighted to see some good friends of the Earth Charter, David and Fran Corton and John Fullerton on this call. So appreciate your energy for this charter, along with many others. And I am delighted to be with my very dear friend Mirian, who I admire and respect. And this year will receive the Thomas Berry Award for all of her work on the Earth Charter for many years. And she was certainly part of the genesis too, as we sat in these drafting sessions. But let me begin sort of in the beginning, which is at the Earth Summit in Rio in '92, which some of you will recall, that was convened by the United Nations, an Environment and Development Conference, but it was chaired by Maurice Strong, a Canadian business person, and Gorbachev. And they both believed that in addition to the policy and the science and ecology and economics that was needed for this very, very difficult and still difficult economics versus development tension, that we needed an ethical basis. We needed a moral framework. And Gorbachev actually called for 10 commandments, so to speak. And Maurice Strong said, going to Rio is one thing, but from Rio, that's the challenge. And that's when they inaugurated the Earth Charter Initiative, which, as you said, is a 10-year process. It was one of the most exciting and dynamic processes that I've been blessed to be part of. Why? Because it was inclusive, it was open, it was participatory, and that included people not only in science and policy or academics with expertise in economics and political science and international law and so on, but it included women's groups. It included Indigenous peoples. It included people from the business communities. And, we can go on and on. But every sense of the multi-sectored, multicultural world that we live in that we had to come towards a commonality, a sense of universal but differentiated responsibilities, respecting human rights and peace and justice and so on. So it was comprehensive, it was inclusive, and this generated energy and enthusiasm because it wasn't drafted behind closed doors with lunches coming in some kind of hotel or whatever. It's a living document. It was a living process. Many people felt that, and they felt listened to. They felt included. Bella Abzug came into the conversation down in Rio +5 and made sure the women's issues were very, very clear. Civil society, NGOs, and so on. So there were many, many versions of this, but I want to just mention 2 points, and maybe Jeremy can then ask another question or so. But if I could give 2 illustrations of this as a living document. When Rio +5 occurred, 5 years after the 92 conference, Gorbachev held up the benchmark draft, and he said, this is a draft still in process. But looking down the row where I was sitting, I saw Indigenous people weeping because this line contained, for the first time in an international document, their worldview. And the line is in the prologue. Earth, our home, is alive with a unique community of life. That is their worldview. But it was prefaced by a sense of cosmology and evolution, that humanity is part of an evolutionary universe. This was transformative. And those lines of evolution came up from a scientist, Eric Chasen, Dewey Ming, a great Confucian scholar, and myself in a small subgroup. And the other thing is this sense of a moral and large perspective was increased by the Harvard conferences that you mentioned, because at every one of those conferences for 3 years, the Earth Charter was the culminating session. And the Jains, the Buddhists, the Taoists, the Confucians, all the Western religions and indigenous religions weighed in on the charter. So that moral framework kept expanding and with more and more sense of inclusivity. I could say lots more, but I'll just stop for
an incredible story. It seems like, I mean, it seems like it's not just the Earth Charter itself that's foundational, but the process seems like it's a model for what is actually possible. And you know, one thing I'm really curious about, but and I'll ask, but before I do, I want to turn to Mirian, because I'm very curious, Mirian, about your role in all this too. I don't know where you got sort of more engaged personally in the whole Earth Charter process, but maybe from either of you, one question I had is, did you run into a lot of flack over those years? Were there times when it just felt, oh my God, it's just going to fall apart. This isn't working. We need to, I could imagine, I mean, we see this beautiful fruit of what happened, but it's a little bit like, maybe to change analogies, was it more like a sausage factory too? Like the stuff that went into the creating was that really difficult at times? And I'm just so curious what it felt like as it was going along.
Mirian, jump in.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much, Jeremy, for organizing this. I say hello from Brazil, where I am now. In terms of your question of times that was difficult,
right?
I think all the time. Starting with sometimes now, with sometimes people say, well, it's too abstract, ethics is not very useful. We need something with grids, measurable, and so there is one line of thought there. Right. So we have just to acknowledge this is going on for 30 years. So people questioning the added value, the usefulness of working with something that some may see as abstract, such as clarifying our values and our principles and having some sort of common ethical framework. So that's one, I think I would say, ongoing, challenge or answer we see. But many years ago, when their charter was being drafted, it was ongoing also questions such as, can we have a common shared vision as humanity,
Yes.
given that we are so diverse?
Yeah.
This is a utopian idea. This constant north-south divide or lack of trust. Sometimes it's north-south, or sometimes it's depending on the different sectorals or areas of knowledge. There is a constant questioning, and which is good and welcoming. Just that I think during the time that their charter was being drafted, launched, and even nowadays, there's always this, I would say, healthy tension between diversity and unity that exists in their charter and that exists in the world. It's just that their charter acknowledge that need to look at diversity, and recognize the diversity of views, diversity of knowledge, of cultures, of life forms, but at the same time the commonalities. So I think from the time it was being drafted until now, I see this as ongoing. I think sometimes stones that people who cannot see that we can celebrate both unity and diversity in the world. And their charter does that, I think, in a beautiful way.
Love that. I love that, that putting those two together, unity and diversity. Like in my own writings, I kind of define integration as exactly that, like as unity with diversity and balance. And I see that as one of the foundations for this vision of an ecological civilization that I'm and others are working on. I'm writing a book about, because I feel that's so fundamental. And that's, again, where the Earth Charter shows the model itself of what's possible. And one thing I notice about that, by the way, is there's the three pillars of the Earth Charter when we read about it now is ecology, justice, and peace. And I was wondering how was it easy to identify those are the three pillars, or was that one of the issues which was kind of subject to a lot of controversy or other ideas around how it should be structured?
If I could just jump in on that point, because it's a really important one. And I also want to just highlight that there were controversies over animals, cruelty to animals, that whole number 15. There were controversy over reproductive health issues for women in 7. There were controversies over precautionary principle, over militarism, and so on. I want to highlight Stephen Rockefeller, who really threaded these difficulties and managed them beautifully. He has a Buddhist practice. He has a PhD in religions from Columbia, and he was the chair of the drafting committee and was incredible. But I think what's really important about your question, Jeremy, is the religions, especially in the World Council of Religions, had justice, peace, and the integrity of creation as part of their principles for really a couple of decades before the Charter came into being. But the reversal to put the integrity of creation, I don't use that word actually myself, but to put ecological integrity first was absolutely central to this Charter. And then to put economic and social justice so that ecological economics and the work that David Korten and others have been doing can be integrated into the integrity of ecology, which is why regenerative economics that John Fullerton's working on too is so important. So, and that first part was done beautifully with the help of Brendan Mackey, a scientist in Australia, outlining what is a healthy environment and well-being. And then Kamala Chowdhury from India really pressed for the third part to have democracy, nonviolence from the Gandhian perspective, and peace. So that integration, I just find ecology, justice, and peace, it sings.
Yes, it's so beautiful and profound and solid, those incredible qualities. And so maybe we can then kind of shift our time frame then from when it was created to once it became the Earth Charter. how did, I'm really curious, maybe Mirian, you can sort of take us from there, like how Earth Charter International ended up as an entity and what its kind of, what its aegis was. What was the idea behind the an institution around the Earth Charter, and what that experience has been like for you right now as the ED of that.
Okay, so in terms of the creation of the institution, there was always, actually at the beginning, it was two institutions, the Earth Council and the Green Cross, that back in '94, with the leadership of Gorbachev and Morris Strong, that put that together. So it functioned more as a project of the Earth Council. And then in the year 2000, when the Earth Charter was launched, after years of consultation, there was a decision, okay, we need an institution to pump energy into this movement, because we needed an institution to make sure it was largely, broadly disseminated, translated in over 60 languages from around the world. So translation, dissemination, and this focus on engaging the young leaders. So I also want to recognize that we have some Earth Charter young leaders here in the room today. I saw a few names, and Catherine and Amanda, I think, are joining us. So from the outset, when the Earth Charter was launched in the year 2000, there was a vision of how to make use of this document, not as something to be put in the bookshelves and just reference, but something that could be used as an instrument to constantly help us clarify, examine our values, serve as a reference for decision making, and also serve as an educational instrument. So we see their Charter from the outset as a valuable instrument that could be used in different contexts and in different ways. So the creation or the reorganization of their Charter project into an institution back in the year 2000 was around, okay, we need an institution to support a movement. So from the outset, the idea was, okay, let's create a movement that is inspired by this ethical framework, a global movement, an instrument as their Charter as a document, and as an institution with, I would say, maybe three legs or three main goals. One is the dissemination and getting institutions and individuals to use it, to adopt it in their different contexts as a reference. But and the second avenue would be to use it as an educational instrument, engaging schools and universities and educators to use it as a useful tool in their different contexts of teaching, learning, and research. And the third has always been the mission of the Earth Charter International, engaging with youth. So ensuring that for the past 25 years, even before the launch of the Earth Charter, the importance of intergenerational dialogue, the importance has been always in our mission to engage, empower, and educate the young generation of leaders to ensure there's some sort of awareness or consciousness so that we have more and more ethical leaders that understand this worldview that is articulated there. And just one more thing on the question you asked before about challenges, and I think it's an ongoing challenge, by the way, that I think their Charter tries to articulate and to address, which is moving our fragmented worldview into a more systemic and integrated worldview. So from the outset, it has been something that they're doing the drafting process. It was something that we wanted to address. And until now, 24 years later, is also something that using their Charter as an instrument to help us move beyond our fragmented approach, move beyond our anthropocentric approach to life, into a more life-centric, but also holistic approach to life.
Yes, yeah.
And of course, the more we have leaders and educators understanding that, I think the better it will be. So certainly one of our core goals and purposes of Earth Charter International in our education center is to use the Earth Charter as an instrument to deepen and expand our human consciousness with regards to how we ought to relate to the large living world.
Yes, right. I so appreciate that, Mirian. And by the way, just for people to know, Mirian has been organizing a conference. Actually, it'll be taking place in Florida in April. What's it called? Like reimagining education for ecological civilizations, right? So that's perhaps at some point we can get the link into that conference in the chat. And I do want to make sure everyone knows, by the way, after our breakout groups, we'll be going to in about 5 to 10 minutes. We'll have the ability for everybody to ask your own questions, share your own brief reflections about the Earth Charter in the big space together. But if you'd like to ask a question that you'd like to hear either Mary Evelyn or Miriam talk to, but you'd prefer not to have the big profile in the spotlight, feel free to put the question or a reflection in the chat, and that's getting picked up, and we'll try to weave that into the discussion in the second half. But one thing I'd like to turn to either or both of you now this is what my sort of bee in the bonnet is around the Earth Charter personally, which is I feel it's so critical that I feel everyone in the world needs to know about it. And and it was funny when you were saying that Gorbachev was saying we need the 10 Commandments for the future. And I sort of I think in that in terms of Gideon's Bible, like in the United States, people who have been in the States know you go into any motel room in the country, basically, open the drawer next to the bed, and there's the Bible, because an organization had made sure that everyone should have access to the Bible. It's like what we need somehow is for that level of dissemination, for people just to reflexively know, oh, the Earth Charter, that's what our foundation is. So I'd love to ask either of you who wants to put your perspectives on this. What do you think is the most leveraged way we can get to that sort of game-changing element where it's so available that people just know that there's something called the Earth Charter that has this worldview to build from?
I think that's the big challenge, isn't it? Anything of this kind, especially in the contested atmosphere that we're living with, trying to endure, trying to get a spiritual center, to endure what Thomas Berry would call the breakdown of all major institutions, be it economic, political, education, and religion. That's what's happening all around us. And it's an excruciating process. But, in the midst of this, these challenges, I don't pretend to have the way or the truth, much less the light. But I think what's so powerful about the Earth Charter, this shift is a shift from an Enlightenment mentality about the individual from independence to interdependence, from freedom for the self to responsibility for community, from the rights of property to sharing for the common good. Now, these are very, very challenging, but there's no future without a shared future. There's no future without air, soil, water, food. It's as simple as that. And this charter holds up all the elements of the earth that are supporting the well-being of humans and all species. So that profound sense of interconnection, which we're all looking for. Jude Curvin, I see her husband's on this, a unitive narrative and a cosmological togetherness and so on. But interdependence is our major challenge because independence, a sense of our rights versus responsibility, is simply not going to last, which is why we need cultural complexity and dialogue. The cultures I study in East Asia, of Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism, are about cultivating the self for a common good, for participating in the changes in society. It's a very different worldview. Indigenous traditions share this too. So that's our challenge, I think.
Yeah, love that. And Mirian, what's been your experience when you've worked on getting the message out to different communities about the Earth Charter?
Well, there are different scenarios. The world is diverse. Our world is diverse, and we have people with different points of views and angles and needs. So sometimes we find people saying, oh, we already have another instrument, or we want to create a similar instrument, but from a different angle. Others who really say, I'll give you an example. There is a school in Costa Rica. It's a primary and secondary school in Costa Rica that has been working with their charter for over 20 years. And they have made it central to that school, because not only because they really think that their charter is a useful tool for them to, as a seed to spark consciousness in their students, but also because they like the sense of belonging to a global movement. So the director of that school, she said, well, we have a small school in a specific place in Costa Rica. It's called Seuna, by the way. And she says, we like to give the sense to our students and to our community that we belong not only to our school community in our neighborhood, in the city, in this country, or in this region, but we belong to a global community that is working with this shared vision and values.
Yes.
So this is not the only example, but there are several of these examples of people who leave aside something that they are doing, and like you, Jeremy, by the way, look at it and say, wow, this reflects so much my own thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
Why don't I just embrace it rather than ignore it and do my own thing and build on it? So there are all sorts of responses, I would say, to when we bring their charter to different contexts. These are just a few examples. So the Jeremy Lent example, which is several times we come across that. So someone who is really working towards global change, shift of consciousness, and find their charter and say, oh, I can use it and build on it rather than create something else, because the person needs to feel that it's useful. So if we use the metaphor of seed, so if we see the Earth Charter as a seed of hope, a seed for action, a seed to spark this sense of Earth consciousness, the seed depends on the soil it falls, right? Yes. So sometimes it falls on a fertile soil that embrace the seed and let it grow and make it wonders out of it, or sometimes the seed just ends in a bookshelf. So. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah,
that's the experience we have had.
The nourishing and cultivation. So get you. And this actually is the perfect segue, in fact, to moving to our breakout rooms, which we'll do in a moment. And as a reminder, you'll be seeing the same people that you saw before. And I'd like to ask you in those breakout rooms to really just consider and share with the other people in the breakout room these questions. One is, how do the principles of the Earth Charter show up in your own life? And the second question then is, how could the Earth Charter help you raise the awareness of these principles in your own community? So that very notion of that culturing and nourishing, because it's in our communities all around the world that can begin to take shape. So thank you, Sylvia, for putting those in the chat. And let's, and in the breakout rooms, by the way, I may kind of hover in and out like a sort of fly on the wall to a few different rooms. So if you see me, I'll just be there for a couple of minutes. You don't need to say anything to me. I'll just acknowledgement or whatever. But I just love to hear some of the texture of some of the different conversations. So let's all enjoy each other's company for 10 minutes. regroup, and then everyone gets a chance to share their own questions and comments with Mary Evelyn and Mirian. Into the main room, and yeah, just some great, wonderful conversations going on that I had the opportunity to hover in on. And right now is our opportunity for everybody to just click on the reactions button at the bottom, raise hand, and really share, either ask questions from Mirian or Mary Evelyn, and or share any other perspectives you have. And just a couple of pointers before we go into this conversation is really encourage everyone to speak their piece. Please be aware there are many other people who want to share their perspectives, so please try to like self-regulate your timing. And also just a special invitation given our patriarchal society that we still live in, with men often the first to be first to the mic. Just a big invitation to women, people who or might be identified as women, to if you feel you've got something you want to say, to speak up, put your hand up. And what might happen is when the Zoom hosts, if they see somebody also from maybe another country, or somebody who's not usually represented so well here on the DTN, you might find that somebody gets jumped ahead of you in the line. So please bear with us if that happens, and don't feel personally insulted or whatever if that's what takes place. And I also encourage other DTN members who have been here before but have not spoken live before. We want to get a diversity of voices in this conversation. And to begin with, I am so delighted, David, to welcome David Corton, who is one of the foundational voices in not just the Earth Charter, but so many of the ideas around ecological civilization that have inspired me so much. So thank you, David, for all that you have brought to our lives. And welcome. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Jeremy. The question that came to my mind in this, I grew up very conservative, and the great divide of our time is the liberal conservative divide. In many ways, the Earth Charter looks like a very liberal, progressive document. But at least by my understanding of real conservative principles, and I don't mean the the ones that are intentionally trying to drive us to disaster, the Earth Charter actually represents both liberal and conservative. So my question is, what are you seeing in terms of reactions to the Earth Charter around liberal progressive lines? And is this a potential vehicle for facilitating that unification?
I think that's a great question, David, of course. Let me also say it comes very much out of our, I would like to say North American, but our US context, I believe. And, so I think it's right at the heart of the matter. And I think there has been some pushback in Florida a number of years ago, for example, that this was too liberal a document, and so on and so forth. So I wouldn't deny this point. How we overcome it is why I like to say food, health, and children. Don't we all want this? So if we find common ground somehow to say, even I who don't have children, but my students have been our children for decades, that the nurturing capacity of all of us for the future is somehow what we have to call on, and move the discourse from a politically heightened one to an ecologically inspiring one. And that's why Thomas Berry's language was so significant, as you know. But I think when we move out of the US context, not that Europe is a perfect example, but out of two world wars came a European Union. which is still imperfect, but is working probably more than any other part of the world on issues that we really care about. So it's tried to set up, and its leaders tried to set up, as we know, a sense of commonality despite diversity and so on. My grandfather's a historian of Europe, and his books were on nationalism that divide us. And his last book was Nationalism or Religion, which he was trying to overcome. And my last example, I just have to say, it was in China for 3 weeks in September. Now, that's a very, very complicated place. But I would say in 8 universities where we showed Journey of the Universe to undergrads and graduate students, the response for the future of the planet, and especially because it included this sense of a large universe perspective, which is part of the Chinese worldview, was electrifying, absolutely electrifying. They were out of their seats, like, what can we do? How can we participate? So I think, if we keep finding those, those positive dimensions that we can build on, and you know this, David, better than almost anyone, but thank you for your question. Mirian, I don't know if you want to add.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Well, I particularly like the question of David that will make me think more about this, because I think the tone of his question is how can we make, because one thing is to have controversies around the Earth Charter if we're too conservative or progressive, but I think what I got from the question, which I think was a good one, how can we use it as a way to unify the polarization? And the polarization is certainly not only in the US. We have a lot of polarization of left and right. Conservatives are not in Brazil too, and many other countries. So in find common ground. I would like to use the example of interreligious dialogue that we have had in the Earth Charter. During the decade of the 90s, there was a lot of different moments in which we had interreligious dialogue. And about 10 years ago, we put together a publication that's called this Faith Synergies, exploring values of education for sustainable development, which I think Mary Evelyn is there and was coordinated by Rick Cluxton. You can find it online. But I think the beauty of that was that different voices from leaders from different religions, bringing what they can identify from their core traditional values of their religions. And there also found a lot of commonalities and even linkages with their charter. So again, I think it's a useful exercise, and I like the question, David. So I will keep thinking about this and certainly invite anyone.
Thanks
how to address that.
Yeah, thanks. And over to you, Pix. Welcome.
Welcome. Thanks, Jeremy. I'll be brief. I wanted to know if there have been any copies made, like beautiful copies, like something of the caliber, like the Lindisfarne Gospels, or so that it becomes a sacred book. Because when things are like that are created, like there was a new translation, or I should say a new copy of a Bible that was recently, and it was very publicized and all very beautiful. And I was wondering about, as I put in the chat, like trying to collect these like world-class calligraphers of all the cultures to prepare paragraphs or clauses, or bring it together, or make some like a residency where artists come together and whether they and share their ideas of how, whether to make teaching materials for educational purposes, or designs for murals that could be used, and also the idea of creating a sacred book, like as beautiful as I say, the great gospels that have been illustrated, because that gets people's imagination. So to create beauty around it is what I was trying to offer. That's all.
Thanks, that Pix. Mirian, what's the answer to that?
Well, I just want to say quickly, Mercedes Sosa, one of the greatest singers from Latin America, was an Earth Council commissioner and, electrified people around the world, and as did Wangari Maathai, in her own way. And I couldn't agree more. Paula and Sam Guanashi are on this, and they've done an oratorio for the universe story. So the arts in all their forms are absolutely essential. So I really thank you.
Yeah.
Has a manuscript been made? Has anybody done a copy of it?
No, but what you're referring to is at St. John's University, they did illuminated manuscript of the Bible. And I couldn't agree that we need something much
Pix,
larger and more inclusive. Yeah.
there's your
Of that-
opportunity,
of that-
Pix.
of that
Fill 'em up
caliber.
with Miriam.
Yeah, I think there must be a foundation or somebody who would, you know, more than crowdfunding that we could engage. I mean, I'm an artist myself, and I know that there are these absolute, like, stunningly talented people who,
Yeah.
know?
You know, we have our artists and creatives group here on the Deep Transformation Network. Pix, I invite
Nice.
you to check out the group, get in touch with Christina Conklin and Michelle Gu there, and maybe we can reach out to Mirian, and maybe your idea can become a reality before too long. So thank you. And over to you.
We just to mention that there has been some artists that have used their charter either to develop artwork, like a painting from each Earth Charter principle. Someone in Australia did that some time in the past. There was a beautiful art book also published in France. They called over 70 artists from France to develop artwork inspired by their charter. So there has been several artwork, but I think we just need more ongoing. This is an ongoing thing.
Beautiful idea. Fantastic. Thank you. Hi there, Brian. That's
okay. Yeah. Hi. So in our breakout group, there was talk about the time of the Earth Summit, which was the Earth Charter emerged from that. I was there, and very much it was. We talked about how it was designed to be. Not just government meeting, the non-government met as well. It's the first time there was a major non-government summit running parallel to a government, a UN government process. And the term came to me, tragic missed opportunities. Often when we have the big governmental UN events, they don't go nearly far enough. And I became convinced way back at the Earth Summit that change is going to come from the organized consciousness and the collective actions of citizens, of people who care about the world. And that's what I still believe in. And so, yes, it needs to happen at the governmental level as well. But my question then would be about how can we anticipate skirting around issues of tragic missed opportunities and create wonderful collaborative opportunities to advance by leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
Good question.
Well, I can quickly share that I think we are living in the midst of a major paradigm shift in that regard. At least I'm a believer that not all answers will come from the UN or the governments, although they're important. And I think certainly this was in the genesis of their charter, that as we know, 30 years ago, when those leaders envisioned how their charter should be developed, they thought in that time, in early 90s, that the answers to the world problems couldn't be addressed in a fragmented manner, nor come only from one sector or one area of knowledge or one government or the UN, but rather should emerge out of the midst of diverse voices, and particularly in the hands of non-state actors. So I'm with you there, Brian, in the sense of, I wouldn't necessarily say a missed opportunity. I think change takes time. We could accelerate that more in terms of not waiting, not nurturing the views that the answers to address so many problems come from governments. What I want to say is that I think we are still living on that shift of paradigm that started maybe 30, 40, 35 years ago. Certainly their charter is part of that history of, okay, we should not focus the answers into intergovernmental processes.
Right.
I couldn't agree more. And I just wanted to say that all the major changes come from grassroots, NGOs into the center. I've watched that for 50 years in academia, being in very complex institutions like Yale and Harvard. And finally, Harvard has a chair in religion and ecology, and so does Yale, just of this year. 17 years it has taken. But the point is, everyone on this call, I believe, is working intensely from the grassroots and from your own institutions. And it does, if we have the patience and tenacity, it will change. These centers are changing. Yale just founded its first Center for Environmental Justice, which has also taken about 15 years. But that's a huge shift. And I'm not saying Yale is a marker, but I'm just reaffirming so much what Miriam has said, what I think many of you know. I see Elaine.
Yeah, thanks. And let me just put you on hold for a second, Alan, before we come to your question. Just wanted to bring in one of the questions from the chat earlier on from Joe Hildebrand, who asked, could you please speak to the relationship between the Earth Charter and bioregionalism? So I'd be, really curious to your perspective on that, and then we'll turn to you, Alain. How does it relate to bioregionalism?
Well, I think, again, Mirian just said, Thomas Berry was talking about bioregionalism at the time the charter was done, and so was Kirkpatrick Sale, and so were people meeting in bioregional centers and areas. And I think that is now a watershed, a sense of where we get our food from and so on, is part of these discussions. And so while the word bioregionalism, I don't believe is in the charter, the sensibility of the local that so many have been working on for a long, long time is definitely there. And it's to say the local and the global and the planetary and the particular is infused in this charter, and with many very specific examples.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mary-Evelyn. Let's turn to you, Alain.
Thank you. Yes, in our group, we all commented on the clarity and the simplicity of the language, knowing that you went through so many conversations to get to what is in the Earth Charter. So that's a word of appreciation. And the second is a question as to, do you know of any communities, local communities or local regions? I'm very much in the bioregional effort too, that actually have used the Earth Charter as a way to guide themselves and the way people are interacting with one another and with their environment, of course, in a precise way, turning it in, if you like, this is the way we are in this community.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have some stories in the past, but currently Edward Mueller, who is based in Costa Rica and is working a lot with regeneration projects and bioregionalism, I think he uses quite a lot of their shot as an ethical reference. And as an inspiration to everything he does there. Coming back to the center, I think this common question about bioregionalism and this sense of community, I think their charter should serve to us as an instrument to be grounded in the community where we are local, but at the same time to keep an eye or aware of these various expanded dimensions of community. We belong to several communities, local, region, even language community or religious community, earth community, community of life. So I think their charter is certainly it's kind of a prisma in terms of, if you look at community from different angles of the prisma, and our deep sense of belonging and responsibility and care and respect to various communities we belong to, and certainly acting in the local community where we are, looking at how we impact in the bigger picture is very much necessary.
I want to just raise this up again because Peter Corcoran and Mirian and Rick Clugston and many were involved in this very beautiful book, which goes through all the principles in the Earth Charter and gives examples, some of which are local. And I do want to highlight that many of you are speaking in the chat about food and agriculture. We've got a local CSA, Community Supported Agriculture here. These are growing like mad, aren't they? And there's a woman in China who we visited in September who came here and learned organic agriculture at a farm influenced by Thomas Berry. She went back, founded her own agricultural farm. There are now 7,000 farms that are organic in China that she helped to inspire. So this is a movement of immense importance, isn't it?
So thanks so much. And I'm just keeping an eye on the time, and we're coming very close to our scheduled 75 minutes for this session. And we see we've got a few more hands up. Let me just check in with you, Mirian and Mary Evelyn. Would you have an extra 5 or 10 minutes to just so we can real briefly, want to make sure everyone gets a voice who'd like to be heard. So maybe what we could do, just in the interest of time, is actually also spotlight Suzanne, and we don't have your name, it just says iPhone, and Barnaby, and ask you each to just keep your question really to literally like one sentence or whatever, so we can hear all of your voices, and then turn to Miriam and Mary Evelyn to conclude, if that's okay. So if we can just turn to you, Ron, but to really try to bear in mind the time space we have.
Yeah, thank you. This is all great. I could go on and on, but I'm interested in the question of power and powerful people. Most people believe in interdependence, do our best to act that way, but the small minority of people in this world have the great majority of wealth and power, and they understand interdependence and interconnectedness, but they are not for it. They like their independence, they like their wealth, and they do what they can with all that wealth and power to promote it and propagandize it. I'm really curious what you folks at Earth Charter, what's been your experience in dealing with these people, and what are your ideas on how we attack what I see personally as the central issue, which is
great question.
What I just stated.
Thank you, Ron. So, question on power, and again, if we can just keep it to a sentence or so. Suzanne, what would you like to add?
I actually would like all your help. What I deal with is how are we going to get to where we adopt these principles? And nobody's really talking about that. We talk a lot about how we got to where we are. We talk a lot about what principles in the Earth Charter are, and there's no dealing with how to get here to there. And I work really closely with Brian Swim, which Mary Evelyn knows, as kind of the linchpin of what would make a system change if we changed the creation story. But what
how do we get to there?
Putting into the chat, I have an essay contest. This is where I want your help. I just announced it. There are money prizes, and it's for writing that would elicit ideas for how to get from here.
Great. Thank you, Suzanne. And that's in the chat. And I do think that's the crucial question. Thank you. And if you want to share your name, I know it's not iPhone.
Yes, I haven't been able to change it. I put my name on the chat, Camila Maya Castro. Some of Alain Gauthier knows me. My question. Well, first of all, thanks for sharing everything that's been shared about the Earth Charter. My question is, reading at it, one of the key things that I take from it is acknowledging the role and responsibility of civil society, communities, and states. But from the type of work that I do, what I was missing is the role of organizations and private organizations, companies. And I think what you did back then was just absolutely amazing. And I think, wouldn't it be time to integrate that? What about integrating business into it? Because business is already active. They're already talking about ESGs and regenerative economies and everything. But I think special attention would be enriching. I live in France. We have this status. Companies have a legal status that they can adopt, which is called company on a mission, where they integrate that into governance. So I think that's an important thing.
Great perspective.
Mary Evelyn, I'm at the HEC Business School, and we have created an HEC Spiritualities Club, which was very surprising and has been a huge success. So would love to talk about it.
It's great to hear your voice in that. Thank you. And finally, again, Barnaby, if we can just keep it to a sentence or so.
So, like the first two speakers, I'm interested in how we're going to make it happen. Could there be, at election times, a voting strategy whereby you tell all candidates that the clincher is if they sign up to the Earth Charter and agree to make it like a global agreement.
Love it. Love the strategy. So great themes, like basically, ultimately, how do we get to where we need to go from here with the Earth Charter? So let me just turn to Mirian and Mary Evelyn, just to sum up responses to those questions and to our session overall. A final word or two.
Want to go ahead, Mirian, and I'll finish.
Well, very challenging. There were many ideas and they're all good. I heard a question about power and how we are addressing power. And the only thing I could think is that we have power everywhere, even in our own houses. We have the power of influencing someone that is very close to us, the way we do things, the way we speak. So the word power, I know the question came from the corporation powers or maybe the government powers, but somehow my head led me to think about power in the sense of we have such a power to influence the context where we are in many ways by how we behave, how we react to things, and how we smile or a comment we make. So we have a lot of power, and I think we just need to be aware of even being careful how we use that power in a responsible way in every context. So that's one thing I heard, and I want just to respond. And I think the other question was, what next? Well, I encourage everybody who is here to feel free to use their charter as an instrument for art, to raise awareness, as an ethical reference. You can endorse, adopt their charter, promote it, use. There was another of the question was about the use in local governments. There were some local governments that use it as a reference to develop local policies and see what were their gaps, and looking at their charter as an instrument to find the gaps in policy making, planning. So, and I would like to end with this, the word foundation, because we talk about ethical foundation is a set of principles to guide us towards a ecological civilization or more just and sustainable world. But then sometimes I think it's not very clear foundation and the word principles, to tell you the truth. So it helps me when I think about the foundation of a building and the foundation of a house, how strong that foundation is to keep that building. So that's when we look at, okay, their charter is an aspiration, right? We are not living in a world that is fully applying their charter as of now. That's true. But the foundation of the world where we want to get for this ecological civilization, the foundation for a more just, sustainable and peaceful world, I think it can serve as that foundation where we want to get. I have been swimming for a few years, and every time I'm swimming, I'm thinking about the principles of good swimming. You can swim more or less, or you can really be seeking to get better and better in swimming and to improve anything we do in life, music, swimming, or any sports. You need good foundation and be using constantly the good principles so that you can improve towards that. So I think their charter serves as that principle that, and everybody here is certainly encouraged to use that and somehow get involved. Thank you so much, and sorry for being so long.
Thank you, Miriam. That's great. Yeah. And then turn to you, Mary Evelyn.
Well, those are all very good questions. I'll sort of lump the business ones together because they relate to a huge challenge. But my father was a corporate lawyer, but with incredible values. And he would say to other people in his office in New York, if you don't pay your taxes, who's going to provide infrastructure, schooling, education, and health, and so on? So I think the business community is getting on board. My brother's been head of Chubb Insurance in New York for many, many years. The insurance company is definitely getting on board. I could say a lot more about that, but they are absolutely key to this transition. We've already noted the work of David Korten and John Fullerton on this call, regenerative economics and so on. Ecological economics is crucial to this transformation, but so are business practices like divestment. Who would have thought that $40 trillion of divestment from oil and gas and so on would have happened in a very short period of time? A third of that is from religious communities. That is a moral force that is simply growing, absolutely growing. And what I want to say about adoption, which we haven't said, the largest conservation union in the world, International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, has adopted the Earth Charter. We can work, and we have been working with that organization. UNESCO has adopted it. The mayors of the US adopted it, many religious organizations and so on. So this needs to continue, and it is with Mirian's work. And finally, you know, power. It's a wonderful thing in the chat about power for the peaceful. How beautiful. I love it. Power is such an incredible thing, and we are in the crux, a crucible, a crisis of power. There's no question. But look at Thich Nhat Hanh, who just died a few years ago in the most incredible war in Southeast Asia. Look what he did. Look what people, the response to his death. Look what Martin Luther King did. This is why nonviolence is so important in there. There are many kinds of power, and we have to hold on to these extraordinary principles that came from, I think, from the universe, opening this space for transformation toward ecological civilization. And I'll just end by a big thank you and one other shout out to art, because Orion Magazine, with Chris Nye on this call, the arts are doing this already. Let's join them. Let's follow them. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mary Evelyn and Mirian, for inspiring us all here today, and to everyone for asking these questions and for being part of this movement for change. And just want to let you know, I think we just got a screen sharing happen from somebody, but if we can unscreen share, that'd be great. But please do know, if you want to get more engaged in deepening like where these ideas are going, if things are inspiring you, you'd like to explore this more, on Thursday, we now each month after these live sessions, we have a follow-on Circle of Practice session 2 days from now, the time to explore further and more intimately what's arisen from our session today into practice, deep listening, integrating, and anchoring. It's going to be hosted by Sigurd Andersen and Galea Tiano Ronen. And I'm just going to put that link in the chat. So you can click on there, sign up for this session 2 days from now to really take it to that next level of thinking, where do we go from here in your own heart and soul and in community? So thank you so much to you both. What a great session this has been. What a great way to start the year. And let's make it the year of the Earth Charter. So, okay.
Jeremy, and all your team.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Miriam. Thank you, Mary Evelyn.